everybody, welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. Today we have another great stash busting favorite for you. It's the solid double crochet granny square. This granny square differs a little bit from what we consider the traditional granny square, this one here, in that instead of it being groups of double crochets separated by little spaces, this one is just solid stitching all the way around. And the only spaces are created at the corners, which kind of gives it this neat teardrop shape emanating from the center to the four corners look. I love this block because you can create a really solid splot of color with it. And I really like this design when I'm making blankets for babies and small children because there are fewer spaces for little fingers and toes to get stuck in. Today I'm going to show you how to make a 4-row granny, which is all you need to know in order to make these as big or as small as you want. Once that pattern gets into your head, it is just going to repeat and repeat and repeat. And if you have questions about how to change color, well, I'm going to show you how to do that too. If you want to join these into a blanket and border it because you're ready, we have directions and 2 different tutorials on how to join your squares and how to border them. You can treat these just like you would a traditional granny square. So we'll make sure those links are in the description box down below as well. So when you're ready to put together your blanket, you can do the whole thing. Anyway, let's grab some stash yarn, let's grab a favorite hook, we will head on over to the craft table and we will stitch up some solid double crochet granny squares together. Today I'm going to demonstrate a 4-row solid granny square in double crochet. So I'm going to need a pair of scissors, a yarn needle. We're going to be using a 5.5mm hook today, or an I9, and I need a leftover amount of medium worsted acrylic weight yarn, size 4. You only need about 25 grams for a 4-row solid granny square, so this is probably enough for 2. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. A solid granny square begins exactly like a traditional granny square. We're going to start with a slip knot, and we're going to chain 5. Now you can chain 4, 5, or 6. This is just to create a ring that's big enough to go over your index finger, and more importantly is big enough for you to keep track of and work into. So after you have your chained links of 4, 5, or 6, I've made 5, join with a slip stitch to the first chain to make a ring. So the ring should fit over the edge of your index finger, and it should be big enough that you can keep track of it. Now we're going to chain 3. This chain 3 at the beginning of every row always counts as a double crochet. So you will count this chain 3 as a stitch when you're counting all of your stitches at the end of every row. So the chain 3 counts as a double crochet. Next, we're going to double crochet into this ring we made twice more. That's 1 double crochet. Remember, we wrap first, reach through the ring, grab a loop. You should have 3 loops on your hook. Wrap once more, pull back through 2, wrap once more, pull back through 2. So there's your 3 double crochet that begin your row 1. Remember, your chain 3 at the beginning counts, so you will count it. This is just like a traditional granny square so far. We're going to chain 2 to create a corner space, and we're going to work 3 more double crochets into that ring. So 3 more double crochets. So there's 3 double crochets to begin, a chain 2 space, and 3 more double crochets. So far it looks just like the beginning of a traditional granny square. It's time to make another corner, so we're going to chain 2 to make a corner space, and you're going to work 3 more double crochets into that ring. Once you have 3 more double crochets, it's time for another corner space, so we chain 2, and now into that ring, which you should still be able to fit it over your finger, and you should see 3 original shells, so 3 shells of grannies separated by 2 corners. We've created another one. You're going to work 3 more double crochet into that ring
and we're almost done row 1. With your last 3 double crochet worked into that ring, chain 2 more for your last corner space. You're going to find that chain 3 that you began the row with, find the top of it, and slip stitch to the top of it to join row 1. Now what you have should look like an original traditional granny square. You've got 3 double crochet sort of shells separated by chain 2 spaces. And if you put it down on your workspace and put your fingers in the 4 holes and pull it outwards, you should see a nice neat square. Here is where we move away from the traditional granny square. So row 2 begins right where we fastened off on top of our chain 3. We're going to chain 3. As we know, the chain 3 counts as a double crochet, so you count it as a stitch when you're counting up all of your stitches in a row. We're going to work directly into the next stitch. Now remember, the top of the next stitch might look a little bit compromised because we joined our previous row at the top of the chain 3, and that pulls a bit on the loops of the next stitch, so it might look a little bit funny, but it's still there. So you want to push your hook right through so that you've got both loops riding over top of your hook before you make your double crochet into it. Then you're going to double crochet into the very next stitch. You should have 3 double crochets, including your chain 3. And now we've arrived at a corner space. So into every corner space, no matter what row you're on, you're going to work 2 double crochet into that corner space. So right into the space. Chain 2 for another corner space, that's for the next row. And before we leave this space altogether, you're going to work 2 more double crochets into it. So every corner space you come across, and you should have 4 in every row, you'll work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into it. Just like that. Now we're on the second side of our second row, and we're confronted with those 3 double crochets from the previous row. You want to work a double crochet into the top of each one of them. Once you've done that, you will arrive at the next corner space, and as you know, you want to work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into the same space. And for the rest of row 2, you're going to repeat what you've done for those first 2 sides. You're going to double crochet into the top of each double crochet, and when you get to a corner space, you're going to work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet. When you get to the end of row 2 and you've worked 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into your last corner space, that should bring you right up against the chain 3 that you began row 2 with. And just like we did before, and for every row that we finish, when we make one of these granny squares, we're going to join with a slip stitch to the top of that chain 3, and that completes the row. You can lay it down flat, and like we did before, put your thumbs and fingers in the corner spaces and pull outward so you can really see that nice square shape coming together. Let's take a moment now and count all of our stitches. Every row will increase by 16 stitches, and every side will increase by 4 stitches every row. So you have 4 sides, there's an increase of 4 stitches per side, 4 times 4 is 16. So every row should increase by 16 stitches. That means that you should have 7 stitches in each side. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And it should be exactly the same on all 4 sides. Let's start row 3. We're going to chain 3 to begin. That's a double crochet, it counts. And we're going to double crochet into the top of the very next stitch. Remember, it might look a little funny. Make sure you get your hook underneath both of those loops. And you're going to double crochet into every single stitch up to that chain 2 corner. When you get to the chain 2 corner, you're going to work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into it. Just like every corner you ever come up against when you're making this granny square. So 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet, That goes into the corner. And now, this becomes a little more apparent in row 3 as well with each successive row. When you come out of a corner, you want to pull back a little bit on the last stitch you made into that corner space to reveal the top of that next stitch you want to work. Sometimes it can get covered and you might skip it and end up working into the next one instead. And you don't want to do that because it'll eventually completely throw off your counts. So when you come out of a corner, just pull back a little bit so you can make sure that you don't miss that first double crochet from the previous row. And you want to double crochet into the top of every single stitch all the way around. And when you get up to a chain 2 space, you want to work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet. After you've worked a double crochet in the top of every stitch, and then 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet in each of your corners, you'll get around to your last corner, which will work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into, and that should leave you with 2 more stitches to work before you get up to your chain 3 that you began the row with. So every row you're going to notice that there's more and more stitches you have to kind of work before you get to your chain 3 to finish off the row. So they don't all end neatly at the end of a row. So don't miss those stitches. There should be 2 left. So just double crochet into the top of each of them. And when you get up to your chain 3, you can join with a slip stitch to the top. Now, as you know, every row of Granny will increase by 16 total stitches, which means each side will increase by 4 stitches. So if we had 7 stitches at the end of row 2 in each side at the end of row 3 should have 11 stitches. 7 plus 4 is 11. So if you have 11 stitches in each side, you should have 44 stitches in total. So always take a moment, especially when you're brand new to working this pattern, to count up all your stitches and make sure you have the right number on each side so that your square remains constant as you make it bigger and bigger. And if you want, you can take a moment, pull out those 4 corners, and you can see this fabulous pattern developing of the little teardrops that emanate from the center all the way out to the corners. I just love how that looks. It is so neat and geometric. Let's do one more row together. We're going to chain 3 to begin row 4. As you know, that counts as a double crochet, and you'll notice that it's more and more and more in the middle of the row. And you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches to make up before you finish this row. Remember that the first stitch right after the chain 3 might look a little funny, a little bit pulled. Don't forget to grab both loops. And then you can double crochet into the top of every stitch up to that chain 2 space and work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet into it. Same thing, continue double crocheting in the top of every double crochet from the previous row and work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet in every single corner space. Once you've worked all the way around and you've finished your last corner, you should have 4 stitches left to double crochet into. And remember, pull back on those double crochets when you come out of a corner so that you can reveal the top of that stitch. It always sits a little bit to the right if you're right-handed or a little to the left if you're left-handed. So you want to make sure you get that stitch and you don't skip any. Work those last 4 double crochets to finish your row. And at the end of row 4, because every side increases by 4 stitches per row, and every row increases a total of 16, we'll just join to the top of our chain 3 here. Then you know that because the previous row was 11 double crochet, so that's 11 double crochet per side in the previous row. Now add 4, that should mean you have 15 double crochet per side at the end of row 4. So 15 double crochet per side, there's 4 sides, that means you should have 60 double crochet stitches, and don't forget to count your chain 3 at the end of row 4. Same thing, lay it down, it's getting pretty big now, you can pull out those corners, and there is a 4-row solid granny square in double crochet. Now if you are going to continue, it's just the same thing all over again. You chain 3 to begin, double crochet in the top of every single double crochet, work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet in every corner, And when you get back to your last corner, you should always have an extra 2 stitches in that last little bit to work. So last row it was 4 stitches before you finished. This row it'll be 6 stitches before you finish. The next row it'll be 8, and then 10, and so on. Every row will increase by 16 stitches, every single one. And every edge, so every side, means 16 divided by 4 is 4. There will be 4 new stitches on each side of your granny as you go. So the math is nice and simple, and it should help keep you on track to make your double crochet solid grannies as big as you need them to be. Once you've made your granny square the size you want it, you can fasten off right where you are. Just grab your scissors, snip a longish tail. If you're using really slippery yarn, then you might want to cut your tail a little longer, just because you want to be able to weave it back and forth through your stitches and not have it unweave. So pull it nice and tight. You can flip it over, grab your yarn needle, and I like to weave my tails in at the base of stitches. So because that's all the way down here, then I'm going to pick up a little corner, a little piece of the back of a stitch, and then weave my needle underneath the actual stitches, so those double crochet stitches, the base of them, all the way out to the corner. Let me just thread up my little tail here. Remember not to pull too tight, because you don't want to pull any of your stitches out of alignment. So once you've pulled your tail through the first time, just sort of tug it all back into place. And then I'm going to double back. So here's where I came out. I'm going to double back over top of that last stitch and then just work back through the bases of those stitches. I might overshoot 1 or 2. And sometimes I put my thumb on the corner of it just to keep it from pulling too much. And then with the little tail that's left, I'm going to go back once more. So I hop over the last place that it came out, right back through the same stitches. And there we go. Now let's say you wanted to change color. When you came up to the end of a row and you were done with that color, you would join as normal with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3 and fasten off as though you were finished with the entire thing. Now you can take a moment to weave in your tail just like we did, or you can leave it out and work over top of it like I'm about to. Now you take the color you want to change to, start with a slip knot, and we're going to start in a corner space. I like to start in corner spaces simply because it's an easy place to eyeball and you don't have to worry about trying to fiddle with one of these tiny little stitches. So you can sort of stick your hook in a big space, slip stitch to join your slip knot, and then you can work over that little tail as you work the rest of the corner space. So you chain 3 to begin the row, just like you would. That counts as a double crochet, and you want to finish off the corner by working another double crochet. So there's the first 2. Chain 2 and work 2 double crochet into the same chain 2 space. That finishes off your first corner. And now you're going to work a double crochet into the top of every single stitch, and I'm going to show you what to do when we get up to that fastened off knot. So you've got double crochet in the first 2 chains, or I should say the first 2 stitches, and that brings us up to that fastened off spot. You know that this would be the very next stitch. See that when you pull up on that? If you were just chaining 3 from the previous row, you'd know that that next stitch always looks a little bit funny. Well, right here, right where you joined and fastened off, this little strange spot at the top of that chain 3 is where you're going to work your next stitch. So you're going to double crochet right into that awkward little space, right over top of that knot. And then remember, the next one looks a little funny. And you just make sure you get both of the loops. Now what I'm doing is working over my short tail, the tail that I cast off with. So it's going to disappear underneath my stitches as I go. And then you just continue working into the top of each stitch from the previous row, and the pattern is exactly the same. You double crochet into the top of each stitch. When you get to a chain 2 corner, you work 2 double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochet, just like I am here, and you keep going. When you get to the end, double crochet right up to the top of that chain 3, slip stitch into it to join the row, and you can either continue with this color by chaining 3 and then double crocheting in the top of each stitch all the way around. Don't forget your corners. Or you can change colors again. It's entirely up to you. But that is an easy way to change colors, keeps everything neat and tidy, and I'll show you how it looks when we get back to the original corner. In the row that you joined your color with, the last double crochet you work will be the last double crochet right up against the corner where you started. So there's the chain 3 I started out of the corner. I'm going to slip stitch to the top of it, and I'm done that row. The same counts apply, so the counts don't change when you're doing this just because you're changing color. There's no change in the actual stitch count. And if you want to continue, you just continue where you are. So you chain 3 to begin the next row. That counts as a double crochet. Remember, the next stitch will always look a little funny, so make sure you get your hook underneath both those loops. And since we started in a corner, it's not too long before we get to our first corner, and the corners are the same. Your 2 double crochet, chain 2, and then it's the same pattern throughout. Double crochet in the top of every stitch, treat all the corners the same, and then when you get back up to the place that you started, you just join with a slip stitch to the top of that chain 3. Count your stitches, make sure that you've got the right number on each side. And like I said, the counts don't change whether you're making this in a solid color or multiple colors. I'm just finishing my 4th row in my color change granny. I worked my last double crochet that brought me up against my chain 3. I'm going to slip stitch to the top of it to join the row, and I'm done that granny square, so I'm going to fasten off. Now, if you wanted to keep adding colors or just keep going with the color you're using, you can literally make this square an infinite number of rows. It will tend to change in shape a little bit. You may find that it wants to kind of lean in one direction, or you might get a bit of rippling in the center. Basically, the larger a granny square gets, the more weight and torque is placed on the center of the square, so it tends to make it want to warp a little bit. So you may find that if you make your squares really, really big, and I mean like blanket-sized big, but as long as you keep them relatively small, or heck, even giant squares that all work into one large blanket, you won't notice the warping. So don't worry too much about that if you do see it. And any wiggling or warping or rippling you might have when you're making modular bits for a larger blanket, get your blanket put together first and then worry about blocking it afterwards. You don't have to worry about blocking your individual squares if you're going to assemble them all into a larger project. You can worry about that later. Just weave in your tails when you're done, and that is how you make a simple double crochet solid granny square.
And that is a solid double crochet granny square. Pretty simple, right? Remember, if you start making these larger and they're rippling a little, don't worry about it. Just get them all built into whatever project you're putting them into before you worry about steam blocking them or washing and blocking. A little bit of rippling is normal, so don't worry about it. We wanted to take a moment and thank everyone who has recently popped over to our website and left us a tip in our tip jar. We really appreciate your support of us here at the Jayda InStitches show. And if you haven't had a chance to visit there yourself yet, we have a really cute little animation on that page that you might want to check out for a giggle, and we'll make sure the link to our tip jar page is in the description box down below. And that's it! I hope you guys had fun learning the stash busting square along with me this week, and we will see you soon on the Jayda InStitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have an awesome week, everybody! Bye!